out our vegan and gluten-free pie dough, we want to do our egg replacer. So this is my egg replacer powder that I have that I'm gonna mix with a little bit of water. Stir this up really well and let it sit for about 1 minute to hydrate while we get the rest of our ingredients ready. So really stir that well. And this amount will replace 1 full egg. Okay, we'll let that sit for about a minute and move on to the rest. To continue on with our pie crust, because this is using gluten-free flour, we don't need to follow the same procedures that we would for a regular gluten pie dough. So we're just gonna add all of our ingredients right into the mixer. So we have our sugar and our gluten-free flour, our salt, the apple cider vinegar, the egg replacer that has been hydrated. So it's got a really lovely texture now to resemble an egg. And then we're gonna add in our fats. And I have a combination here of vegan butter that has been chilled as well as the shortening. So we're just gonna add that all in and we're gonna paddle this until it comes together into a ball, more like a tart dough. And then we are going to place this onto parchment, make a disc, and chill it for about an hour. I'm also gonna add in my chilled water. So this is iced water. That will help bind everything together. We don't need to worry about over mixing this dough because again, it has no gluten in it. And we don't cut the fat in because it doesn't operate the same way that a regular pie dough does. So we're waiting for it to more like a tart dough just to come together as a ball, and then we'll remove it from the bowl. Once your dough comes together, you can scrape it out of the bowl. Keep it all in one ball and then try and form it into a disc. So it is to start out the shape of whatever you are going to form it in. In this case, it'll be about a 9-inch pie crust. So I'm gonna make it about, let's say 1/2 inch thick, form that disc, fold my parchment. I'm gonna let this chill for about 45 minutes to an hour until it's set, and then we'll start to roll it out. So our lemon meringue pie dough has rested. I'm just gonna open up my parchment paper and place another one on top. Now again, my goal is to fit it inside of this pan. So what I wanna do is take my rolling pin and just roll in between the parchment. Remember, it's not gonna have the same texture as a regular pie dough, so it's gonna wanna kind of fall apart a little bit easier. So instead of adding more flour to dry out the dough, I'm deciding to place it between the two pieces of parchment to keep the moisture inside of it a little bit more. So I just want to keep turning it and allowing it to stay in a round shape as I make it thinner and go in a circle. Make sure that you're evenly distributing that dough across the entire amount of parchment. It should move pretty easily between the paper. Our goal is about 1/8 of an inch thick. We don't want it much thicker than that. And then we're gonna place it inside of the pie pan. So we'll just test it out right now. Go ahead and place this here. Obviously we're gonna take the parchment off of it, but it looks like it is going to fit. So if you do this and make it a little bit longer to compensate for the elevation here, you should be pretty good. So also feel the thickness of your dough. Looks like it's pretty good. I'm just gonna make it a little more even, and this is just so much less messy than having this flour and sticking to your cutting board, because again, that gluten doesn't tighten it up because there is no gluten. It's a gluten-free flour. So this will make it much easier to work with. Keep it cold while you're working with it, because the softer that fat gets, the harder it is to manipulate. So what I want to do now is remove one piece of the parchment, and we can do one of two things: flip it over this way or invert it into the pie crust this way, whichever you are most comfortable with. So I'm just going to place it here and then feed it inside of the pie pan. It is still very, very sticky, so don't worry about if it's not absolutely perfect, because what you can do is just piece the pieces together. But it does have to go into the groove there to make sure it is lined all the way inside of the pan. And once it is done like that, you can gently remove the paper. If it's having a hard time because it's too warm, go ahead and place this back in the refrigerator for a few minutes to chill that fat, and then it should release itself quite easily. So once you get a portion of the paper starting to remove, you can kind of very gently tug it off of there and use your fingers if you need to, if it's stuck in any of the paper, and it should remove itself. But if you go too quickly and you pull, the whole thing will tear. So it almost has its like own greasy coating here. It's like a non-stick surface, and you just want to pull that off. Okay, so by no means does this look gorgeous like a regular pie dough could. But what you can do is just place it back up on itself and then press it into place. Remember, you can't really overwork this dough. But what we are going to do is we are going to chill it just to set the fat a little bit, and then place it right into the oven and bake this until it's a nice golden brown. We do want to blind bake it, and that means so that it will not puff on us, we want to place the parchment back on top with the baking beans. But I'm going to make this crust look a little bit nicer on the bottom, make sure there are no holes, and then we'll do a decorative edge just to finish it off so it looks clean, and then we will get it ready for blind baking. My pie dough is chilled now, so it's nice and firm. I don't have to worry about it sticking to my fingers anymore. And then what I'm going to do is take one of the pieces of parchment paper that I actually rolled the dough out on and place it on the inside first, and then pull it up the edges here. What I did also on the edge of the crust was just tuck under some of the excess of the pie dough, and then if you really want to, you can make an imprint along the way so that it has a nice decorative edge. It probably is going to bake up into itself, but you'll have a slight decoration along the edge here. So we'll do that around, and then we'll do the beans. Okay, so my edges are decorated. Place my paper right back in. Pull it up over the sides here. And I'm gonna weigh this down with some beans. I use the same beans over and over for baking, and just make sure they get labeled for that. And this is my pie weight, so you don't need any fancy weights. Pretty much single layer, a little bit more than that to help put a little bit of pressure downward on the crust. I'm gonna place this on a sheet pan and go ahead and put it into the oven. I'm gonna check it at about 30 minutes to see where we're at. If it looks like the dough is set slightly, I will remove the parchment and the beans and continue cooking until it is a nice golden brown. So I just checked my crust. It's about 30 minutes in, and it's still not totally done, but it is set enough to where I removed the beans and the parchment. So I'm gonna cook it for about another 15 and see where we're at. It's time now to make our lemon curd filling for our lemon meringue pie. And what we want to do is this directly over the stovetop, but being very gentle about the amount of heat that you're going to apply to this. So the very first thing we want to do is put our sugar and our cornstarch together and whisk that up so that it doesn't create any lumps inside of here. So whisking that together first and then adding the liquid ingredients is going to be a tremendous help. Okay, now we're gonna add all the rest of the ingredients except for the vegan butter. So what we wanna do is place all of my lemon juice my water, my oat milk, while I'm whisking this together, again, to try and prevent anything from lumping and also to dissolve that sugar. I do not have the heat on just yet. So mix all of your items together first, and then you can turn the heat on. Then I'm gonna add my salt, my turmeric to give it a little bit more yellow color. And then the last ingredient here is our lemon zest. So what I'm gonna do is take a microplane and just zest my lemon directly over the pot. Once this is all in, I'm going to turn on the heat on a low medium and constantly stir until it starts to thicken. So I have the heat on a medium-low, and I want to consistently whisk this while it is heating up. Don't wait till it gets hot to whisk it. Just keep whisking the entire time, and it will eventually get to the point where it starts to thicken. Cornstarch will start to thicken about 180 degrees, which is about simmering temperature. So do be patient and keep your eye on it. Once it starts to thicken, we're going to really kind of whisk it vigorously to make sure that we have a smooth custard. We're going to remove it from the heat at that point, and then we will add in our butter. Okay, so I've been whisking for about 4 or 5 minutes now, and I can really actually feel it starting to want to thicken. So remember, this is a vegan curd, so there's no eggs. We don't have to worry about the protein coagulating, but we do really have to worry about that cornstarch getting up to the right temperature to start to thicken and not overcooking it so that it will curdle on you. But I can really see it forming and having a viscosity that is extremely different. But if you don't take it far enough, this will stay in a runny state. And we definitely don't want that. So what I'd like to see are a few bubbles forming throughout while I am thickening this. So I'm gonna keep stirring, making sure I get into those corners really, really well. And hopefully you can see how much thicker, and it's starting to hold the lines in the custard, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So it will go from 0 to 60 very quickly, and you really want to be vigorous about stirring at this point. So I start to see a couple bubbles in there. I'm going to stir this pretty well for about 30 more seconds, and then I'm going to take this off the heat. You definitely don't want to walk away from it at this point. All right, I'm going to turn the heat off, and then I'm going to remove it from this hot burner, and then go ahead and add in my butter, let that melt, and then just set this aside and keep stirring constantly every few minutes to let it cool down before we pour it into our prepared crust. All right, our filling has cooled slightly. It's still very warm, but it's ready to pour into our crust here. So I'm going to just pour it right into the shell. Go ahead and use all of it if you like. And then I'm going to cover it with a little bit of saran wrap and chill this for about 10-15 minutes or so in the refrigerator. And then we're going to make our meringue topping and let this set up. Ready to make our meringue topping. So I'm using the juice from the canned chickpeas. We call this the aquafaba, and I just drained the chickpeas out and measured the amount of liquid that we needed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to whip this alone for about 2 minutes to get it kind of like to a soft peak, and then we're going to add in the sugar, cream of tartar, vanilla, and tiny bit of lemon juice, and we'll bring that to stiff peaks. So we're starting to get foaming here, and what's happening is that the chickpea water is made from the proteins act very similarly to egg proteins. So when you start whipping them and agitating them, they start to unravel, and then when they unravel, they start to foam. And so we can really make a very similar meringue that we do with egg whites. So now that I've started it, we're gonna add a little bit of cream of tartar, and that's gonna help with the stability of this foam. So we're gonna add that little touch of there. And then I'm gonna start to slowly add my sugar, just like a regular meringue, probably a little bit faster than the egg whites, so it really grabs onto that, creates more foam, and becomes a little bit more stable. We're gonna add a little bit of lemon juice for additional acid and flavor, and then our touch of vanilla extract as well. So I'm gonna start to whip it again and slowly add the sugar. So our lemon meringue pie is ready to be topped. Our meringue is amazingly thick. It does have a smell of, a little bit of chickpeas, so it isn't gonna taste exactly the same, but the properties and the texture is incredibly creamy and stiff. So we wanna use that right away. You can definitely pipe it on if you like, but we're just gonna do like a rustic topping. I'm gonna take the top off of here, and we'll just kind of place it on to the top. And if you'd like, you can just serve it like this. I would let it rest in the refrigerator for a little while to really have the lemon curd set up underneath, pretty firm. And then you can even torch this to brown it. So I think I'll do that so you can see how it will look like a toasted meringue.